with the best deal here was I sort of looked at the merits of some of the deals here. We had DeJounte Murray, we had Rudy Gobert, obviously big names there. Christian Woods moving, but I settled on a player here that was not that long ago. In all honesty, rookie of the year is in the 50, 40, 90 club, 19 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, and got traded for not a single starter. And I think that's a huge win there for the Boston Celtics, yeah. And I think Malcolm Brogdon here is a huge win in this free agency period, and this trade, obviously, that Boston swung. They went all the way to Game 6 into the into the NBA Finals here, and they've added a player that's only 29, and he can really sort of fill a gap that they really needed. That sort of ball handling point guard that Marcus Smart isn't always the best option. And I think, Boston, I think, are going to be knocking on that door again for the finals. Maybe a couple more wins next year. I think it's going to be exciting for Boston next season.
It's funny because this is premeditated. So I wrote mine down and I actually picked the exact same one because Malcolm Brogdon has value, big guard. But one of the concerns is games played. So there's a bit of durability issues with him as the years have progressed and he hasn't played a lot of games. But to be honest with you, with what they gave up, they haven't really... Like if he misses half the season, it's not really a big deal. They haven't given up a rotation piece or two to get him. As you said, no starters. And, we know that these starters are good enough to at least get to the NBA Finals or Eastern Conference Finals. So he really just adds on to what they're doing and makes that size a bit bigger, which was the defensive scheme for them moving for the playoffs. They were just big and they were, bodying you up and giving you a hard time. So, it was a great pickup, I think.
I think Boston has killed this period of the year. Adding Gallinari as well doesn't hurt them. Yeah, there's absolutely sort of some health concerns with both of these additions, I think. But the fact that they didn't give up any of their top 8 rotation players to add them, and they've got the key players that they're going to play big minutes on, and they can manage the minutes for Brogdon, obviously, in that sort of situation. They're not asking too much for him throughout the regular season. They've still got Derek White, obviously, coming off the bench potentially. They got the depth there and experience. So, it's really just adding that extra option and a sort of a different sort of look, I think. So, yeah, huge addition there, I think.
I feel like we might agree on this one as well because it's painfully obvious that Rudy Gobert to Minnesota is the worst off-season moves thus far. It's an absolute haul that Utah's got, and Utah's won that trade because the reality is Rudy Gobert is an expensive player to have on your team, and we've kind of seen the ceiling of that team as is. And then being paired up in Minnesota, it's a lot of star power, a lot of notable names on that starting 5, but you're going to have 2 guys that clog the paint, and I understand that Cat can be a stretch 4, but surely his productivity goes down if he's relegated to that full time. Obviously, he gets some compensation on the defensive end because there's been concerns about his, ability to defend or stay on the court. But this move doesn't move them out of where they kind of were. They felt like a bottom 4 playoff team, and I can't see them changing that. At best, they get to the 5th seed.
It's interesting you picked the Gobert trade, and you're saying Rudy Gobert to the Timberwolves is the worst trade that you've seen or a deal that you've seen. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to say Minnesota have made the worst deal in this free agency period too, but it's not because they added Rudy Gobert. Okay. I think that what they've done here to add Gobert, and he was obviously available. Utah was shopping him around. They're going to some rebuild mode, obviously, at this point now. They haven't been able to achieve what they're hoping to achieve with the unit that they had and the core they had, so that's fair enough. So adding Gobert, I think, for the Timberwolves was, it's a swing. It's a bit of a swing, for a home run, I guess, and it might pay off or it might not. They might strike out, right? But I guess I don't have an issue with them adding Gobert, okay? But I think the worst deal was that they traded away a player on their starting 5 that, from a stats point, it was only 9 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. But they gave away Patrick Beverley. And I think that was the worst deal of this free agency period in this trade, because he's the heart and soul of this team. Okay, you want a player, if you're going deep into the playoffs, like Patrick Beverley, who's just going to be this dog that gets onto the other players' best guard, best wing player, gets under their skin, does everything that he can do to help you win. And they should have probably looked at, and I'm sure, their salary cap points here and things like that, including something else in that deal to get it over the line. And obviously gave away a lot of draft picks, okay, and some other sort of players that weren't really rotational players, because Utah have no purpose to have Patrick Beverley. They don't want him. They don't need him. In fact, I'm not sure. I don't even know how much they're going to look to play him in next season. Okay, especially if Mitchell gets moved too. They're in total rebuild mode. They got no use for this player. But the T-Wolves gave him away to get Gobert.
Mhm.
Okay, and if he gets, mark my words here. I'm going to put it now in the recording. If he gets, waived, okay, or obviously bought out, okay, because the Jazz are not looking to be contenders, or even top 4 next season, okay, he will latch on with a contender. And I bet you the Timberwolves regret that they made this deal and they put him in this package.
I completely agree. That was one of the players that stood out. There was a lot of running jokes when they won the play-in game, just how much he was celebrating. But, I think that's a heart and soul aspect. That's someone who clearly wants to be embraced. And that's kind of how I viewed him with Minnesota. He, was sent to Grizzlies, then sent straight to the Timberwolves. And I think there was a sense of like, I want to establish a home. I have value. I try really hard, etc. And they've off-cast him for a big name. And you wonder how that comes back to get them, because there's a lot of youth on that team as well, and the older guys such as Cat and Rudy Gobert aren't necessarily proven in anything. I'm not saying that Patrick Beverley is more of a winner than them, but there was a veteran aspect there. There was a bit of tutelage going on with Anthony Edwards. There's something is going to be as a ramification of that moving forward.
One of the deals that I had hoped to have seen, and we probably a lot of people probably hope to have seen that hasn't gone down yet. In my from my side here was KD getting shifted. I'm sort of a bit sick of talking about KD getting shifted here, and I would have liked to have seen KD getting shifted somewhere where the Brooklyn Nets obviously got themselves a bit of a haul. Okay, maybe a little bit of a talent, a bit of talent as well. I'm not necessarily an all-star, maybe an up-and-coming young player. And KD simply just went to a team that might not have been a contender. Okay. The Nets simply looked at pulling a trade here that obviously shifted him somewhere that worked in their interest. Okay. And it's not all about KD, because I think I'm a bit sick of having to watch KD now for the rest of this free agency period. All right. As much fun as it is to try and talk about all these trades that could happen, let's just get him shifted, because, let's talk about other things besides KD, right?
I thought we would have went 3 for 3, but we didn't. I've actually picked my team, Deandre Ayton, right? Now, the reason why I picked him is we're 2 weeks into free agency and nothing's done on Deandre Ayton. And the difference between him and KD is KD will be playing for the Nets if nothing happens. And that's known information. And it's also 4 more years of that if they choose to do nothing with it. Deandre Ayton currently is not signed and is requiring some form of offer sheet to then have something happen. And obviously it's stalled, not because Phoenix want to keep him, but because they're exploring trades. So he really is a domino to fall, because if KD is off the table, then Deandre Ayton goes somewhere and they get some form of return. But their timing, their window is now. They're not going to wait out a season or 2 seasons to see what happens with him. Yes, they can retain him, but there's got to be a fractured relationship. It's definitely not worth having him. You'd rather take 2 players that aren't as good as Deandre Ayton at this point, that will slot into the team, fit with the chemistry better than what's happened, because the message that's been sent to Deandre Ayton is, we don't want you, plain and simple. And considering that we're 2 weeks in and no one's even offered a sheet, there's clearly something behind the scenes, because every team is entitled right now to offer him money and no one has. And I think that's because there's got to be an aspect of negotiation. Phoenix has clearly made it clear, we will just match the offer and keep him. You will not get him for that. You actually need to have some form of package for us to get him.
No, look, you're right. It's there's a few names there still like Ayton that even Harden still's on the market technically, that haven't had their contracts finalized or the offer sheets tendered, I guess, in that sort of sense. So I guess it's definitely interesting to see how that one shakes out. I guess you're just real quickly, you're a stats man here, yeah, for facts man here, more accurately here. KD doesn't have a no trade clause though, does he? he can't choose to veto where he goes, right?
No, I don't believe so. But
I
I
don't
guess
believe so either. Yeah.
well, it's one of the threats of, even though they don't have a no trade clause, there is definitely a growing mantra currently in the NBA where players are just like, oh, I have an injury. I'm going to sit out. I'm not going to play. And it's all well and good to say, oh, well, we'll send Kevin Durant to Charlotte, for example. But he might just turn around and say, Charlotte, oh, my Achilles is playing up and I'm not going to play. And, getting players to actually commit to the place is a whole other issue.
Well, let me just give you a hypothetical here to end this podcast. That whoever trades for him, okay, that's not a contender right now. So KD might not be happy to go there, still owns the KD trade chip, even if he refuses to play. So you would still have him under contract for, I think, 4 years. Is that right? And you would then be able to shift him to somewhere else for assets. And you are not a contender at the moment anyway. All right. So, if he simply refuses to play because he won't, suit for whatever reason, you still have that asset that's under contract for multiple seasons that you can flip into something else. All right. So I think that's something to consider there too. But look, at the end of the day, if I'd done a bit more research here and put a bit more time preparing this, I might have done a hypothetical trade. So maybe I'll put one together and I'll put it at the end of the podcast here and let's have a look at that, huh?
Maybe, yeah. Obviously the ones that are floating around, Miles Turner for DeAndre Ayton is the consolation prize if we can't get KD. And I really thought that maybe a KD deal would have went through a bit earlier. But I think after the Rudy Gobert trade as well, there's a precedent set now where if Rudy Gobert gets 4 picks along with players, KD has got to be worth at least 4 good players and 4 high picks. Like you can't trade for that and get like 1 or 2 players back and then look at the Rudy Gobert trade and say, yeah, we totally did market value.